Hey guys, Windsor here, and welcome to the Groove Guru podcast. What if happiness isn't something that we need to chase, but something that we can realize that we already have? If only we knew how to let the light in. Today, I want to explore what I see as a real key to happiness and share a simple and profound shift that can help us live with much more clarity, ease, resilience, well-being, and happiness, no matter what our circumstances are. Now, before I dive into this one, I invite you to like and subscribe to my podcast and these videos if you enjoy the kind of thing that I share. So today I want to talk a bit about realizing happiness and embracing that, and also all of life much more fully. And setting the table, I want to start with some fundamentals. We all work the same way. We're all alive. We all think, and we're all conscious of life to the extent that we are. And we all also, sometimes we suffer and we want to feel better and be happier. And at the heart of this, we're all connected to life force, and we can't see it, but we can realize that it's there. And it's what animates the human body and all of life. And it's the difference between a person we can describe as dead or alive. That in an alive person, the life force is present within them and animating them and their experience. Whereas in a person who's quote unquote dead, the life force is no longer present within them. And this is analogous to the way that electricity works. We can't see it, but we can see what it does. It's like how it allows our devices to function. When there's power to them, they usually work. And when there's not, they don't. Okay? And we can see this energy behind life and the effects that it has. We can't see it directly, but we can intuit it and realize it's there from the effects of it that we observe. And why is this relevant to happiness? Well, this energy behind life is what allows us all to have an experience of life. And as humans, that it shows up via the power of thought, which is what creates all of our feelings all the time. We think it and we feel it. And that happens all the time. And sometimes, if we look in the kind of direction that I talk about in these podcasts, sometimes we see that, the power of thought. But at other times, we don't notice it. Well, why is that? As an interesting angle to explore this from, it's like something known as the Troxler effect. Simply the Troxler effect. It's something. It shows that when we fixate on a point, a central point in a colourful image, the colours around that central point fade. Not because they disappear, but because our mind, it stops registering them. It filters out what it sees as constant. Okay? And this is what happens with thought. All right? One moment we can see that our experience is coming from thought, and then in another, we can stop noticing that thought's always shaping our experience, and then we misattribute our experience to coming from the outside. Okay. Now, let's play with this a little bit. So I've put an image on the screen that has a cross in the center, and I invite you to focus on the cross in the center. Now, keep looking at it and focusing on the cross. And as you do, gradually or perhaps more suddenly, the colors start to disappear, but the colors haven't disappeared. It's our mind's perception that's changing. And the mind, it prioritizes new and fresh, changing information. And when something in our perceptual field becomes constant, our neurons become less responsive to that, which leads to certain perceptions fading. Okay? And that's why when we wake up to that we are living in a thought-created experience all the time, and we see how helpful it is to realize that, sometimes we can forget that. And sometimes that perception fades and we mistake our experience and our feelings as coming from the outside world. And that's never the case. And that's why it's always helpful to remember and be aware of the power of thought playing out in the moment, and use our understanding of that to help us navigate life in increasingly wise and helpful ways that helps us be much happier as we live our lives. So just like the life force, the energy behind life is always present whether we are aware of that or not, so is the power of thought. If we think it, we feel it and experience it. Only always. We can never stop feeling what we think. It's impossible. But when we don't see that, sometimes we can get caught up in unnecessary mental struggle and believe that happiness is something that we've got to attain, when in reality it's a natural byproduct of when we stop gripping onto thought so tightly. And the more we have awareness of how all this plays out, the more we can navigate our psychological, our inner landscape with much more ease and clarity. So this episode is about happiness, which I'm suggesting is our innate and natural state. Yet we don't always feel happy, okay? And we all suffer to some extent, and we want to feel better. And we try to mitigate that suffering and get rid of it in various ways. That might be exercise or, hot, cold exposure, breath work, medication, meditation, or other things people get into that can be, drugs, alcohol, porn, gambling, food, etc. And people often look for happiness, which is an internal state, via external means in the world, like achievements, practices, accumulating possessions and experiences. And whilst those things can appear to bring happiness, it's temporary and doesn't create that lasting, ever available sense of happiness itself, which you could call joy, but really it's something that there are no words to describe. It's a pure feeling. And when we start to see that our happiness is an inside-out experience, it comes from within, we then start to stop chasing it from outside of us and look to where it actually is within us and start accessing that directly. And again, the happiness I'm suggesting is when we let go of holding on to and gripping on our thinking and let it flow. And, thought and all mental activity has always been generated from within us, powered by the life force and brought to life via our consciousness in a way that we feel whatever we think. Okay? So again, what gets in the way? It's gripping into thought and straining into thought. That's what creates mental stress and all of the suffering that people experience. And if we do that incessantly, that's what creates more prolonged suffering that takes us out of our happiness. And like an image of a waveform shows, life, it has ups and downs, highs and lows, and peaks and troughs. And emotionally, we all experience highs and lows, high moods and low moods. It fluctuates. We all have ups and downs and anxiety and bits of depression here and there to some extent. And that's inevitable and a normal part of the experience of being human. Okay. And there's a tendency to prolong the lows. And the cause of that, it's thinking into them. And that's what most people do when they have low moods. They try to think it and think their way out of it. And that's what people do in therapy. They think about all the low mood thinking they've already created and slosh about in it. But we're looking for presence, and you can't think your way into presence. And it's thinking into the lows that we have that can make what would be otherwise fleeting feelings of, say, anxiety and depression, and make them more into chronic and prolonged ones. And it's when we start to accept the flow of thought and don't resist it and come fully into the present, the lows that we have dissipate quite a bit. And the more we feel present and come into the here and now, we open to our natural state of serenity and happiness and start to feel better. And when we feel this heart of the moment, again, not preoccupation with thought content and thinking into it, but let that go, we start to feel into this pure space that's within us that has no words to describe it. It's the space of well-being. It's where all of our resilience is and all of our happiness. And the more you come into the now, the more you set yourself free from the constraints that we can make up. So when you see that your feelings are coming from thought, from within you, and not from externals, you can see those things that you do to try and feel better are essentially ways of helping you change and drop unhelpful thought and be more present. And when you see that mechanism, you can still do the things that you do, but more mindfully. They stop becoming a crutch and something that you can be guided by your wisdom to do. And when you know that your happiness and your resourcefulness and your resilience is what naturally appears when you let go of the thoughts that block it, more and more you start to naturally awaken to that space inside of you. And when you understand the pure, true nature of thought at this more essential level of presence, the feeling of pure love, you could say, again, there's no words to describe it, you can find your psychological freedom and such a greater sense of vibrant aliveness that we all have access to. When we hold on to thoughts, it's like when we create a dam, that it creates a build-up in water pressure. And when we hold on to thought all the time, it creates mental pressure. And holding on to thought, it dulls the senses a bit. And it's when we start stopping, creating resistance in our thinking by gripping onto it, and when we release our grip and allow thought to flow naturally, we start to awaken to a state of much more presence and much less resistance and much more ease. And we feel better and our natural creativity appears. So the moment that you start to see that you create your own suffering, the phrase, you're doing it to yourself, is one my father always said to me, which, pointed to any time that I was in a mood or whatever, or feeling off, points me to that, and still does, that it's because of what I'm focused on. Not anything out there, but it's all in here, okay? And the key is the feeling that we're in. Our feelings let us know the quality of what our mind is doing and our current level of clarity. And as soon as we intuit that we're in a low mood, we can feel it. And that when we drop that thinking that will immediately start to feel clearer, that becomes natural to do that, and is a way of living that completely changes things in a way that you can't unsee when you see it. Okay? And if you really want to be happy, it's as simple as dropping all the negative thoughts, and or not gripping onto them and holding on to them, but just allowing them to pass through and opening to much more presence, which is what I'm suggesting your true happiness really is. Okay? And it doesn't mean not taking action and not doing things. I'm not saying that at all. It's just that when people think into unhelpful thought that they have, they can think themselves out of their most resourceful states in the moment. I recently watched or rewatched the movie Ford versus Ferrari, or I think Le Mans 66 as it's also known as. And in that one, there's a scene in it where the character Christian Bale plays, Ken Miles, he's talking to his son and he's describing how the key to success in racing, it's basically, it's not to narrow our field of vision, but to open fully. And as we do that and become more present, we see everything. And the more that we widen our focus in life by not overly engaging in the intellect, and I'm not saying don't use your intellect, but recognizing when that's unhelpful to do so, and the more we open to the present, the more we naturally see what's all around us, and the more we allow our intuition and wisdom to guide us, whatever we do, in a way that's filled with much more ease and clarity, and also happiness that helps us make our best decisions and show up most responsively and do whatever's needed in the moment. And another thing is, as we live and we feel everything that thought creates, again, we can't stop feeling what thought does. And we see that, okay, I'm thinking it, I'm feeling it, and that's just what thought does. We can see thought for what it truly is, which is a passing illusion that feels real. And it's also one that can never hurt what we are deep beneath that at our core. And the more we see thought for what it is, even though it can feel scary at times, we don't need to be afraid of it. And as we feel everything that thought creates and not be afraid of it and just allow it to flow through us, we open our perception, we come more into the present. And again, that's where all of our resilience is and where we're clearest in the moment to give our best. And when we let go of more and more of the thinking that we do that creates stress and suffering, we let go of our mental resistance and we feel lighter. We let the light in. We lighten up. All right? We allow our happiness to reveal itself and we unleash our resourcefulness without limitation. And that's something that we can always trust, whatever shows up. So, bringing this one to a close for this episode, the next time you feel stuck and weighed down, pause. See if you can notice the thoughts that you're gripping onto and let your feelings alert you to that. If you're feeling tense, signal, that's what I'm doing. My head's not clear right now. And let that be an invitation to loosen your grip on your thinking and let thought flow naturally. Knowing that beneath that you're perfect and perfectly whole at your core. And instead of chasing the happiness that you seek and the answers that you seek, come into the now and allow your happiness to emerge. Because it's already there, waiting beneath the noise. And when you do, and you allow your spirits to lift, you'll become clearer and freer, and you'll find that the light's always been there. You're just letting it in. So have fun. Let the light in. Trust it. And I'll speak with you soon.